This photograph of John Lennon pretending to be dead, surrounded by the Beatles, wasn't my idea, it was his. I was just there, and I was good enough to be able to capture it. It was in focus, it was well exposed, no autofocus, just, on film. So the truth was they wanted photographs for the White Album. They had, all the photographs were old. And so that's not untruthful. And of course, photography can lie very well, and does. And half of my career has been, as a cinematographer, has been, I suppose, being kind with light to female and male actors, or making light that was characteristic to the story. So I don't quite know. You don't wander around making truth. You're telling a story. The story drives the work. You're truthful to the story. That's the object, really. I was a paparazzi, but not. I was too scared, too nervous to be aggressive. I would make friends, and I would just walk in, and people would think I should be there because I was there. Never use flash, and I always use a little Nikon on a short strap, black, with a black jacket, and I would just walk and take pictures, and it was very good practice for being courageous. And what could they do? Sometimes they caught me and threw me out. So. But I met somebody who became my agent when I was young. I was only 21. And he was the Beatles coordinator, photographic coordinator. And he became my agent. And he was supposed to get 40% of what I earned. In the end, he got 100%. Took all the money and vanished. But I photographed the Beatles in July of 1968. And some of those photographs became famous. And at the same time, I was I was photographing film sets, movie sets. Not as the movie photographer, but the special photographer. At Shepperton Studios or Pinewood Studios. And I liked it very much. I liked the atmosphere. I liked the teamwork, the camaraderie, the whole ambience of, and it seemed not so lonely as working as a still photographer by myself in the middle of the night making prints and going to parties, but never, it was, and so I thought, well, I want to go to film school. And on the basis of of course I never finished my education, but on the basis of my portfolio, the Royal College of Art had two places that they could give as they wished. You didn't have to have any qualifications. And they gave me one. And then there was a new wave of lighting coming in. So although the film school was useful to get a basis, what was exciting was that we were not using multiple lights around the set. We were using one light source, and we were using filters, and we were using smoke. And that became the way you shot advertising. And so I worked with Tony Scott and his friends and colleagues from after film school. I didn't do anything glamorous at all starting off. I did industrial documentaries. I did anything to earn some money, to get some experience. And then I got advertising, and then I got a film. And from the first film to the second film, then the third film was The Hunger with Tony Scott. And then the Hunger was the direct line to shooting The Cotton Club. And after that, I began to get a career in Hollywood. Although we were on a location, that wasn't a built set, it was up 3-4 stories in Mayfair. It was enormous. The production designer had great tools because the techniques, the artists from the studios were wonderful painters. They could draw horizon lines, and they could paint sets outside windows, and they would ask you, what lens are you going to shoot your wide shot with, and at what height will the camera be, so that they could paint the horizon line and the perspective to suit the lens. So on The Hunger, although that was a location, we used it as a stage. And I remember I lit this photograph that's with 2 arc lights, the old carbon arc lights that you can't get anymore. And it was about 30 or 40 feet in the air. So two condors, 2 cranes. But because of the sound, we would get the lights into position, but then we'd switch the motors off, and they rigged batteries to keep the condors, the arms, the hydraulics active, so they wouldn't sink. But there was no noise, because usually you'd have the diesel engine going. He was always hunting for the setup, something in his head. Sometimes I'd mark the dolly, and he'd sit there on the dolly looking through the lens, and he'd move it a little bit this way, and then he'd look and be very quiet, then he'd move it a little bit, and maybe he'd take 40 minutes and then we'd end up just maybe a few inches to the left of his first thought. He was looking for something. He wasn't designing the lighting, but he was designing the image. I was designing the lighting. He would always have this nervous thing that that when he saw the set the first time, I should switch off some lights. Now, if I'd lit it as I thought it should be, that was a bad thing. Well, sometimes there's only 2 lights, 2 big lights. I couldn't. So what I would do, I would add extra lights, which I didn't need. So when he said switch it off, I'd switch 2 lights off that weren't doing anything really. And then he was happy, and then it would look just right. But he never knew I was doing that. You can't decide for the director or the editor how it will be cut. And that's not what you're doing. But what you must give them, it's your duty really, is to give them enough material, by which I mean angles, that they can build the tension, they can build the story, the montage. The director who says, I just want to do 1 shot, 1 angle, this is what I want, it's like the old adage, he has a fool for a colleague. Because what he's doing is he's anticipating, he knows how the film will result, its final mood and movement and energy. And if he just has that 1 master shot, that moving, masterful shot, he'd best know how his film's going to be. Not that I don't admire the great directors who do have that, but this is Tony Scott's first film, and he wasn't stupid. He knew he needed many shots to build or slow or something. And it's not that we did thousands of takes. We didn't waste our time and energy, but we did. We did. I think this sequence, the opening sequence of The Hunger with Bela Lugosi and the underground in the club, maybe there's 50 shots in there, which we did in 1 day. But my lighting was not complicated. So with 2 cameras, 1 main camera and 1 picking up, we could get a lot of And then Tony had the taste to use the beautiful moving shot, with the overhead wires, and then with David and Katrine coming up and then going into the close-up. He didn't break into those, but he was getting a pace going. And then the exterior of the house, when the four of them come to have their orgy, they think, and then rigged it so that the lights came up theatrically as if it was a theatrical set. Those sort of things, that's what a cinematographer can do to help the movie, to help his director, to help the look. As a cinematographer, that's part of your job, is to, what is the story and what is the taste of the movie? That is one of the few instances where we're actually deliberately doing something so that as David Bowie's character, as you wait in the same light, in the same place, nothing changes except he grows 40, 50 years older. That was deliberate. Of course, in reality, the light would have changed, the sun up and down. Didn't want to do that because it would have implied more passage of time than actually occurs in the story. You can play with the reality. No one jumps back in horror and says a bookstore would never look like that. They're looking at this beautiful woman in the white coat and the black hat and the incredible lips. And then you cut to Susan Sarandon, and she's already under the spell of Deneuve. And that's the thing that's going on. You're not doing a documentary. Katrine remarked at the screening of The Hunger last night that, and I'm very touched by it, I didn't light her, I illuminated her. And luminescence has more of a meaning. You can light a room by turning the switch on, but to illuminate a character, to illuminate a face, to get at its essence, it's two things. It's the light and it's the lens. I remember that on The Hunger, our favorite lens was anamorphic 180 millimeter. And I would shoot at 2.5 and 2.8. And so they threw the background out. And it was a beautiful look, but of course the light had to be beautiful too. And probably because I didn't know better, it was very single source. When I say I didn't know better, I wasn't. She's so beautiful. It was so beautiful in that you didn't want to fool with somebody that beautiful, so beautifully dressed and so wonderfully made up, and it was so color-caught. It was just gorgeous. And to fuss with it would have been criminal. We went too far in shooting. Sometimes it was black. We would experiment so much there was no exposure at all. But we left that for the end. Don't forget we were friends too. So I said, I don't know about this. Why don't we do that near the end of the movie so we don't get fired, In some ways, it's reverse cliche. It's created cliches. It was original at the time. If you don't know that, you think, well, it's another MTV-style movie. It created the MTV style. Tony Scott, myself, Brian, Milena Canonero, created a look that influenced and eventually bored people. But it was a cultural look of the 80s. I think the position of the DP is diminished by the technology, but not necessarily by the technology, but by the rise of the visual effects supervisor, who becomes, on some films, the author of the vision, and the DP becomes merely the technician. And Marvel films, for example, don't invite the director of photography to the DI, to the digital intermediate. They're not welcome. The place of it, the director of photography is replaced by the visual effects supervisor in that case. And as more photography is virtual, using green screen or whatever techniques, then the position of the DP is diminished, which is why I don't want to do those films. I prefer to do nothing. I'm only attracted to films where I will have control. And I don't want to put myself financially in a position where I have to take films where I won't have control. The whole point of me, arrogant as it is that I have control of what I do. And if I can't have that control, then I don't want to do it, and I won't do it. So. But that's very easy to say. But that was my attitude when I really needed the work, and I didn't have any financial resources. But I still felt that was the job of the DP. I still think it is, but you've got to pick and choose, or be able to pick and choose your projects. In some ways, a very low budget film gives you more control because there aren't so many producers, but again, there's not so many choices to control the light, to control the montage, to control the shooting. My favorite director is a director who loves his actors and loves their performance and loves the screenplay, and gives me the responsibility of photographing his, for want of a better word, vision. It's not a vision, it's a very practical business, but his look and his coverage. It's a very, very practical job. The relationship between the DP and the first assistant director is crucial to making enough time, to judging the light, to helping the production to bring you to the place in the shooting where you get great results. If he is your enemy, if there's a lack of cooperation between the production and the DP, then it doesn't usually end well. Sometimes you can't help that enmity, but the great first assistant directors and will have their favorite DPs because they can work together. You can see one man's problem, you've got your own, and you can work it all out. And it takes a while for that light bulb to go off with. I'm very sympathetic to Spielberg's point of view that if you want to be an Academy Award winner or nominee, then it should be shown in movie theaters, and there should be a 3-month gap before it's streamed. And I think the experience of watching films with other people, which is so deeply the basis of cinema as we've come to know it, is lost. And I feel that much as I admire Netflix for its courage in making Roma, I don't see a studio in Hollywood, France, in London, or anywhere having the courage to make that film. I do wish that they would understand and promote cinema as one of our great cultural gifts. And instead, what I fear is happening is that the culture of cinema is being diminished by, unfortunately, the very people who are using it. I mean, how can I deny that Amazon's courage to make Cold War, which is a brilliant movie and wonderfly photographed, also in black and white, different ratio, but but I wish that they would voluntarily allow these superb movies to live for a while in cinemas before they're streamed on phones. Or I mean, I watch these movies also at home, and I've built myself a movie theater in my home with Dolby Atmos and a great projector and a big screen, and nobody's allowed to talk or eat if they come to see a movie. Shay Goldblatt, but I'm crazy. But it is possible with a great television or a great projector at home to recreate the cinema experience. But that's elitist of me. Most people can't do that. They don't, and that's fine. So I'm just saying that Netflix and Amazon are benefiting from a century of cinema culture, and simultaneously they are financing films that the studios won't finance, but they're also destroying the very culture from which they benefit.